Welcome, everyone. I am Joe Sarkis. You can't see me because my screen is, or my camera is doing something weird. But we welcome you to this webinar, which is an opening and which is essentially rolling out our edited book that has been published with the Greening of Industry Network study and a Springer Nature series. I'll mention a little bit about that as we go along. The title of the book is A Systemic Transition to Circular Economy with a subtitle of Business and Technology Perspectives. And the sponsors of this, other than the publisher, Springer and Springer Nature, is Future Earth. And Future Earth is an organization that researches global sustainability, and it has many different research groups and different missions. And one of the research groups is the Systems of Sustainable Consumption and Production Knowledge Action Network, of which the Circular Economy Working Group is part of this Knowledge Action Network. The other sponsor of this event is the Greening of Industry Network, which is also the responsible for the edited series from Springer Nature on the Greening of Industry Networks. And this is the series. So for anybody who's interested in putting a book together, please contact the publishing editor, Aaron Schiller, or the co-editors, Diego Vasquez, Bruce, and myself. And there's also, right now, there has been 13 books over 12 years. And one of these books is a companion book that is based on social dimensions of the circular economy. Our book, the book that we're launching today, is based on business and technology. So the program for our webinar is as follows. Right now, the welcome by me, and a brief history of the book and how it developed, and it's going to be a very brief history. And then we'll have an overview and introduction of the book, the goals, the structure of the book, and that will be with Steve Evans, with Aldo sharing information as we go along. And the editors of the book, by the way, are Aldo Ometto, myself, Joseph Sarkis, and Steve Evans. And then we'll have our speakers. Each of them will be introduced and they'll give a short presentation about their chapter, some highlights from their chapter. And you see the title there. The first speaker will be Ken Webster. This will be chapter 6. The next speaker will be one of our industry contributors, the practice aspects, Paloma Cavalcanti. And after that, she's chapter 7. In chapter 8, Purchasing and Supply Chain Management by Fabio Ferraz de Arruda, Pollice, and I apologize for the names if I misstated them. And then after those 3 short presentations, we'll have an open discussion and some questions. And we ask everybody to participate. And if you do have questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. We might come back to you later on when we have the open discussion. And we'll be paying attention to the chat box as well. So now let's go a little bit about the history of the book. If you remember, there's a little thing called COVID that occurred maybe early 2020, late 2019. And during this period, we had a forum. And the forum was co-sponsored by many of the sponsors here, as well as SCORI and the International Forum. And this was the front page for that forum. And it was called An Equitable, Inclusive, and Environmentally Sound Circular Economy. Now, this was sponsored by the working group and Future Earth, as well as all these other sponsors. And during this process, we decided that we would put together a series of projects related to these topics. And one of the goals, one of the outcomes that we wanted to get from this is a series of books. And I showed you the companion book, and there was another book that is being mentioned. And this book that we are launching today came from this, and this was in May of 2020. So 4 years later, we have the book, it's been launched, and we will discuss some of the issues. But it had a history based on this open forum that we held 4 years ago, or almost 4 years ago. And one of the presenters at that time was Aldo Ometto, and this was the title of it. And if you notice, the title is very similar to the book that eventually evolved from this presentation. Of course, it evolved as we put together the proposal and the bringing together the authors of each of the different chapters. And that is the brief history of this book. And now, Steve, I will let you take over, and you can talk about the book, and we can go in the introduction from the first chapter.
Thanks, Joe. Well, I don't think it's news to anyone who's bothering to attend today that we think circular economy is important. But the interesting thing for me is this moment in time. I was at a circular economy event earlier this week, and I found it really fascinating for a number of reasons. I think that when we look backwards about what we've been doing in CE, we can largely see growth, but it's been, let's say, linear. And maybe when we're looking forwards from this point in time, we're going to see something that's exponential. Now, this is the classic shape of a transition S-curve. Are we at the point of inflection? And I think that the more I talk with people right now, the more I think we actually are. Rather than hoping we're at that point, there seem to be signals that we are at that point. So it is a moment of transition for the circular economy. There can't be a better moment for the book to come out as we move from linear to exponential. And we wanted to explore what that might contain. So if you give me the next slide, you'll see that in the first part of the book, next slide.
Yes, I'm trying to make, oh, there it is. Sorry, Steve.
There you go. So in the first part of the book, we're looking at this systemic transition through a number of critical lenses. The first lens of value, the second of system design, the third ecosystem, organizational practices, and we'll soon hear about it from Ken, the last chapter in this section, chapter 6, on shifting to ecological transitions. So a number of lenses that I think are exploring this moment of change. And then in the second part, we've been incredibly lucky, I think, mainly, not luck, mainly Aldo and Joe's hard work, to gather together a series of case studies that I would suggest are deep. They're very well understood by the authors. And I think they still manage to bring novel ideas. But for me, the key is that they're systemic. They're not small, iconic projects that are happening in a corner of the business. And that's part of the big change that's happening. We've been able to get together some excellent case studies. You'll hear more from those from some of the chapter speakers in a little while. So the timing is fantastic. I think it is absolutely wonderful to have the book out at this moment in time. And it's even better that I can finish by introducing Ken Webster. I'm supposed to introduce you, Ken, which is a bit insane because everybody knows you as a pioneer of the circular economy. I'm only going to name a couple of your roles as a visiting professor at Cranfield University and as a fellow of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. But you don't really need an introduction, do you, Ken?
That's very kind of you, Steve. I think I can probably cope with that. Okay, welcome everyone. I've been given 10 minutes, just as everybody else has, to make a little bit of an input and to share a few thoughts from the chapter I wrote with Professor Stefano Pascucci from Exeter. I spent a couple of years working at Exeter after I left the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. after quite a long period as head of innovation there. And so I'm going to get straight in, and there are just 5 slides, I think, and it might help. I'll try and go fairly quickly, and I'm going to share screen with this. I think that's working. If it isn't, please just
Yes,
let me
it
know.
is.
It says it is. Okay, that's chapter 6, as Steve pointed out in the first section. And this is really about a changing perspective, or rather contrasting the existing perspective, which is very, very pervasive in circular economy, with something that's perhaps more aligned with what we now know about, we've known for some time, about the structure and function of complex adaptive systems, particularly in the living systems context. So I'll just go very quickly. This diagram on the left is very nice, but it's not in the book. But I'm using it just to illustrate a couple of things. And the first one is top right. I've always, claimed or suggested that the circular economy is a heuristic. Heuristics are terribly important because it's actually how Nassim Taleb says that humanity makes progress. It doesn't work with precision. It works with the rule of thumb, a bit like the idea of democracy. It's fairly easy to get a handle on it, but when you look at it in practice, so many variations, some more effective than others. And it's a bit the same with the circular economy. It's a suggestion about a direction of travel. And in the chapter, Stefano and I say that, top right, that really, and this is part of the original framing and shaping of existing ideas around the end of the first decade of the 21st century, just reframing that. It was designed as a framing exercise around that time as an approach which in the literature is called the eco-modernist agenda, which is basically technology and human ingenuity can help us decouple resources to a greater or lesser degree. And we can carry on with getting jobs and economic growth. And a lot of the work I was involved in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was really appealing to 2 audiences. And that was business, and the other was policies within the EU. So circular economy is often presented as a framework for thinking, but it has been usually implemented as just a toolbox. Here are some business models. Here are some things that work. And you can see from the diagram on the left-hand side, many of the familiar areas in which circular economy is discussed. But I've always been rather uncomfortable with that because this is almost like a picture of a pipe work. You know, you've got some stuff, you make it flow around, you come back, you try and have as little leakage as possible. Yeah, you could even speed it up a bit as long as you're preventing leakage. And we can just carry on as normal. Well, that's if you like, a mechanistic interpretation of the economy, which has got deep roots in the literature, of course, and in practice, but a deeper resonance in all of the sorts of works that people were looking at around the end of the first decade of the 21st century. There was a pretty clear idea that the writers like Braungart and McDonough, or the folks behind Natural Capitalism, or Janine Benyus, they were very much taking insights from living systems as a way of exploring the circular economy. And this resonance persists. So in the chapter, we say that a significant resonance exists around the deeper idea of using insights from living systems to design eco-effective systems and create a nutrient economy through circularity. In other words, it's about maintaining capitals and creating nutrient or food for the system. But there is more to that. And we take a little look at this in the chapter. We have taken something from Gerner's work and Leitire and Julanovich around ecological systems. And this is about whether the largely eco-efficient approach used by most people in looking at toolkits for circular economy, let's be more efficient, is not, we think it's perhaps not really good enough, because if you take examples that these academics have looked at, or that eco-efficiency is not enough. We want to be eco-effective. In other words, in real living systems, there is an effective approach, which is an interplay between efficiency and resilience. And in the ecologies they looked at, the viable systems exist somewhere around the top of this, if you like. I was going to call it a pyramid, but you know what I mean, this distribution curve. And that's where these systems are viable. It's not to be as efficient as possible. That makes them very brittle. It's not to be as resilient as possible. Virtually no change is possible there. Stagnation is built in. So why does this matter? So we have a little exploration of that. And this is been a useful diagram always, to have a chance to look at something that represents, rather more detailed way, a living system. And we characterize top right and top left. That first of all, on the top left, efficiency is doing things right, doing more, faster, lower labor, energy, materials costs. That's fine. That can, as we say, lead in the literature, it suggests it leads to brittle systems. And effectiveness optimize the whole system. Transform, return, maintain, system fit. Now, this is very interesting, I think, because when we look at the economy, we seem to be very much focused on the right-hand side. This is what I called in some work I was doing at Exeter, a use of complementary opposites. If we look at the right-hand side here, and these tend to reinforce each other, and the current structure of the economy tends to be around technical cycles in terms of circular economy, much more discussed that way. It tends to degenerate capitals. It tends to be linear, really. It pretends it wants closed loops. It looks at performance and retaining value. It's a human build. It's in moving into economics, it's rent seeking because it seeks to limit competition. And it often results in monocultures. And its claim is that it wishes to be in terms of efficiency, and use a market as free for all. And money is a store of value, and capitalism essentially based upon this idea of creating a surplus. And it assumes that there's an economic scarcity in operation. It's been busy in closing the commons, and sharing economy efforts are really about monetizing idle assets, but under the conditions of limited competition. Now, if you look at the opposite of all this, you get something that's less familiar in mainstream circular economy, but it also includes something that would fit very well in that diagram around resilience, around many nodes and connections. And these reinforce each other too. So it seems that in all real world systems, we have to have an interplay between both of these. But it's significant that the ones on the left, that's what we claim, are much less focused on in terms of circularity or in terms of an economy as a whole. You know, just pick up a couple of things. The productive economy dominates on the left-hand side here, not the finance, insurance, and real estate economy, which under the label rentier capitalism is claimed to dominate our existing economy. And the markets are free and fair to all, which was Adam Smith's original suggestion. And money is much more about medium exchange and so on. It's much more illustrative of a detailed network that you might find in that image of the lungs. Let's go back one. I'm finishing quite soon. So we're looking at the potential to see this balance between efficiency and resilience reflected more in circular economy discussions. And Gunter Pauli is well known for saying that we ought to be adding value with what is available. we ought to be scaling out, not scaling up. And the characterization at the bottom right in the block letters, it's to encourage exchange and resilience rather than flow and structure. So in our view, a circular economy which takes insights from living systems would attend to the structure of systems in a way that would deliberately encourage the rebalancing towards resilience without losing efficiency, but not emphasizing it so much. So you'd have a much more viable circular economy that worked at all scales and did encourage more exchange and resilience rather than just flow and structure. It's not about moving more stuff, it's about maintaining capitals, making them, making products, components, materials available, and allowing people to participate in the economy in a local sense. So this is an argument we make, and you can enjoy it or not, to say that deliberate intervention in creating the right structure for an eco-effective economy does mean attending to the infrastructure that encourages greater resilience. Because if you don't do that, you risk an economy which is biased towards brittleness, which is biased towards accumulation rather than distribution, and which in effect, it doesn't do its job if we're hoping to have a regenerative, inclusive, and all those list of very good words that we want to happen. I'm just about going to leave it there. I think that's the end of my thing. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. But this is part of what we were looking at. Obviously, that doesn't cover what happens in 7,500 words, but I think it gives a flavor of what we're looking at, which is use insights from living systems and the structures that are found there to inform policy and action towards the productive economy. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope that's sort of okay. Questions later, put them in the chat, folks.
So yeah, I just wanted to say, just in case we start something, to give the other speakers plenty of time, and we'll have a bigger mixed conversation at the end. I hope that you can hold your questions, and if you have a short-term memory problem, type them into the Q&A. Now we need to move on to the next speaker. Who's introducing?
All right.
Aldo, you introduce. And Paloma, you can bring up your slides while Aldo is introducing.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken, for your brilliant speak. And I will introduce our partner, very good partner, Paloma Cavalcanti, is the Senior Manager, Global Sustainability Customer Success at Hewlett-Packard Company. She has more than 15 years of experience working at the private sector and consulting companies, joining efforts with government and social sector organizations in the field of sustainable development, CSR, urban development, and climate change. In the IT sector, has been regional head of sustainability, supporting advocacy strategies and compliance process, as well as being the customer and public-facing programs, event, and press. So, Paloma, thank you so much for all efforts and working with us in this book challenge and in this webinar series of the book launch. It's a very happy and it's an honor to work with all of you. So Paloma, please, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Aldo, for the introduction. Pleasure to be here today. So I will walk you through a little bit of the content that we developed for the book, giving you a highlight of how circular economy, at least at the corporate environment, is usually integrated into the sustainability ESG strategies, right? How we've been developing our strategy, particularly in my field now at the company. I'm not necessarily the technical subject matter experts around sustainability, but I do talk on a daily basis with most of our customers. And that's a very interesting way to understand where the trends are going in terms of big companies setting requirements in their purchasing policies around circular economy, recycled content, and many other aspects. So I'll start just to give you, not spend a lot of time in this slide, but just to give you the context of where circular economy lands into our strategy. So that's our 10-year sustainable impact strategy. And you can see that we have defined 3 main avenues, right? One around climate action, human rights, and digital equity. I will not explore human rights and digital equity in this conversation. But you see that on climate action, we have 3 big buckets of goals and programs and initiatives, all connected to each other, right? Carbon emissions, circularity, and forest. The main reason why forest is there is because we are also a print company. We have a considerable amount of packaging that goes into our products. And so tackling forest and biodiversity is also part of our strategy. But circularity is kind of connecting the dots between everything. And so there is no customer conversation where we present about circularity that we don't need to talk about the impact of circularity around carbon emissions. So the life cycle analysis is, at least at a product level, it's key in terms of how we frame circularity. So just to wrap up and go to the next slide, one of our goals is to achieve 75% circularity on our products and packaging by 2030. And what that means is to advance not only in recycled content into our portfolio of hardware, but also tackling things like materials innovation, comparison between one material and the other, things like supply chain resilience that Professor was speaking just before, extending the lifetime of the device, advancing towards services. All of those things are connected, right, into our strategies around circular economy. And that's a little bit of what the chapter brings. It's how we are tackling this challenging across the operations, right? So you see here that we work through multiple layers or loops, right? Starting from parts, going into products and services, right? On the left side of the chart, you can see that on the part side, we invest efforts in terms of recovering. We have goals around recyclability and reuse of parts and pieces into the chain. And I will not tackle a lot, but there is also a component of repairability, right? We've seen regulations, especially in Europe, advancing towards repairability. In France, for example, we are already seeing a repairability index as part of the regulations. The mandatory requirements around having a percentage of our portfolio of remanufactured devices. So you may not instinctively connect those regulations with circular economy, but they are all talking about circular economy. And so here is one cycle, right? Then around products, things like I was mentioning in terms of the advancement of recycled content, remarketing, reused products, right? Repairability, upgradability around products is also a very strong trend. So all of this to say that in terms of circular economy, at least on our environment, in terms of the technology industry, we are not talking only about one single aspect, right? We are talking about many aspects. And I even mentioned about the services, right? The service model. I think that is one component that we've been seeing the advancement in the corporate sector, and the way we tackle services is that the fact that you transition from a transactional model where the customer is buying products and then using and then discarding, recycling, etc., to a service model where the customer is actually closing a contract of service in terms of technology usage, that allows us having a better life cycle management, right, throughout that contract. Applying the right maintenance, maximizing the lifetime of that device, monitoring the performance, and then having control over those devices at the end of life, right? Because that's one of the key problems in the technology sector. Once you buy, once the customer buy in a transactional mode, it's very hard to get back that product at the end of life through recycling programs, very hard. As much as we invest in programs, we create coalitions, we work together with governments, we all know that e-waste is a critical problem, right? And our programs, I should say, our programs have more than 30 years in terms of, Planet Partners program, our main program around recycling has over 30 years of life. But we are never over 10% return rate. It's very hard bring back those products. So I think services will bring a little bit more control. Take the example of instant ink is one modality of service that we have for consumers, right? Because the majority of services are advanced in the commercial arena. But for consumers, the instant ink model, for example, that we give a glimpse of the service into the chapter, it allows the consumer, once the cartridges reach its end of life, to ship back at no cost as part of the subscription back to us. This type of scheme, it's helping us improve the return rate of products. So long story short, I think that the key message here is that for the technology sector, we are talking about multiple layers or loops when we are talking about the circular economy strategy, right? I would not here again, not meant to be propaganda or anything, but just to give you a real examples of advancements, right? In terms of the multiple products that we have to bring to concrete examples of things that we are doing. So for example, notebooks, we are already working with 90% recycled aluminum, recycled magnesium, right? We are advancing in terms, we analyze carbon fiber is better than magnesium. The engineers compare both life cycle analysis and concluded, okay, magnesium and aluminum, it allows you to recycle infinitely, right? There is no loss in the recycling process, while plastic, even though you recycle, you lose quality, right? In when you are recycling. So you need to put additives, you need to put a percentage of raw material into that. So those kinds of things, right? Shifting to fiber-based packaging. You can see model of printers with 60% recycled content. So that's, a few examples for you in terms of products, right? How they translate in terms of recycled content. The last thing I want to mention that we also included in the chapter is an aspect that was mentioned before, right? How do we tackle better social outcomes, right? When we are talking about circular economy, how do we create automatically a more inclusive circular economy into that equation, right? So this is an example of a project that we started in Brazil back in 2018 with the informal sector. where we formed a coalition together with a partner, and we started to put our heads around how to formally include cooperatives back into our supply chain. Traditionally, we have recycling suppliers, right? All companies, but not necessarily working with cooperatives and the informal sector. So we started this project where we set up an economic model together with this partner, where we were kind of paying a premium price to the cooperatives for collecting e-waste, so they don't feel compelled to sell it parts and pieces and scraps to the middleman, right? These allow them to have better working conditions, because we know that they open the equipment, they do not necessarily have the capability to do that. There are risks imposed in that process, right? So by reinforcing their capillarity, capability, their skill in terms of being at their community, acting as an environmental educator agency, we were reinforcing this role instead of the role of simply open up a computer or, electronic device, whatever it is, and imposing risk to them, and then just scrapping and selling it at the best price of the day, right? So the project is very successful. They started very suspicious about the approach, but ultimately now they see value. They make more money. We improve income. We have social KPIs. We look into the average income that they have. We train them, and we attach social benefits to it. So this is an example of a strategy that we apply to really bring the informal sector into the equation of circular economy. I could talk hours, but I only have 10 minutes, so I'll pause here and stop sharing. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Paloma. I will now introduce our third speaker. Fabio, if you could bring up the slides while I'm introducing you.
Sure.
Fabio is the head of quality Latin America at Unilever. He has experience in almost all aspects of the supply chain innovation and technology, and involved in end-to-end strategies. I would say, Fabio, beginning to beginning, since we're talking circular here, in different areas. And if I am correct, you are a PhD researcher right now at São Carlos School of Engineering at University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? I'm not seeing myself.
I can see it, but I can't see. There's a little blue mark in the middle there. I'm not sure if others see that or not. There's like a blue box.
Oh, there's nothing in mine here. Hold on a second, please.
Okay. There. Okay. Oh, it's still there. Steve, do you see that blue box on his screen?
Yeah, it looks like some sort of dialog box that has been blanked out, but
Yeah.
maybe you're getting a message from some lovely app. Another one has just appeared.
Okay.
I'll try.
The random generation of dialog boxes.
They just pop up.
Yeah, I don't see anything here. But
Okay, well, one of the dialogue boxes went out. Why don't you begin anyway, the slides? It's your words that are more important right now.
Okay,
So please.
So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. I'm also speaking on behalf of Marcelo Scarcelli, my friend that's also works in Unilever. And together we built this chapter. And thanks, Aldo, for the invitation. So how this thing starts? I think it's important to understand Unilever's context. In 2010, we launched what we called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. It was a big change in the sustainability agenda in the organization. And really the idea behind that was Unilever will keep its growth, but we would need to decouple the growth from the environmental impact. And that became a business strategy, and that involved our global brands such as Hellmann's, Dove, Oxy, and all the brands or all the categories, product categories, would have to develop their strategies to reduce the environmental impact based on innovation, new technologies, and also a big effort from supply chain side. So I brought two different perspectives here, two different projects, one related to the new plastics agenda, and the second one related to sustainable sourcing. So the first one is a very interesting one because it's really how procurement had to change the way they used to do traditional sourcing strategies. So in general, we use a very common methodology in the market called the 7 steps of the strategic sourcing, which is very well known in the industry. But that in general is a very powerful tool when you deal with direct suppliers. And in this case, we are talking about our plastic conveyors, converters. Yeah, so the guys that blow bottles, for instance, for shampoos, for liquid detergents, for softeners, and so on. And this project was about stop using virgin resin and start using post-consumption resin, PCR, instead of. And that was a completely different requirement for the procurement organization, because they had to put into this conversation a totally different set of suppliers. As Paloma mentioned, cooperatives, for instance, or in our specific case, private landfills, PCR converters. So all this new ecosystem had to be first developed and second managed. It was really something very disruptive in the procurement agenda, because that's not how in general it's done. Other interesting thing is about the learning points on this, yeah, because of course the procurement strategy should have a goal of having a competitive cost, but the main goal is really to have PCR availability. So we changed the way we measure the success of this, and availability was really the critical factor for the success, because once you claim that you have a bottle that is 100% PCR, it has always to be 100% PCR. You cannot make it flexible, because you are claiming, you are putting your credibility at risk. So the supply chain, or the reverse supply chain behind this, was really something very new for us, and of course, for the procurement organization. And how to manage this ecosystem in which our transactional systems, our EPRs, for instance, were not designed to do. In general, we have a linear flow. Our SAP is built to have this traditional set of flow. And now with all this reverse and different suppliers, we have to do in a very different way. In the beginning, using Excel, and then later on, sophisticating a little bit more. But I think that was really a very nice experience. Today, I can tell you proudly that we have been achieving our goals on PCR across Unilever. And we have a lot of products that are really 100% PCR. And we are not using virgin resin anymore. The second one is about sustainable sourcing for palm oil. Palm oil is a really critical ingredient in the industry. We use palm oil in foods. We use palm oil in ice cream. We use palm oil in cosmetics. We use palm oil in personal care products and household care products as well. So it's very unique ingredient with a lot of uses in the industry, but a very complicated supply chain because there is a lot of noise when, of course, you have a situation in which you make deforestation to produce or to plant palm oil and to start the chain in a very bad mood. Yeah. So what have we done? Unilever had a very strong commitment on palm oil. The commitment is really to be 100% using 100% of our palm oil from sustainable source. We are almost there, very, very close to 100%. But to do that, we had to do a lot of supplier development with big farmers, but also small businesses. And that was really a very big challenge for us because there was a lot of work to educate, to train, to prepare an environment in which these small holder farming businesses could have profitability that is good for them, and also would keep all the benefits of this sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture could bring. And again, the area that has or had lead all this was working close with these suppliers, but going forward into that, making what we call a round table of sustainable palm oil. Unilever co-founded that in 2004. That is, again, an ecosystem in which we have farmers, NGOs, other farmer suppliers, yeah, and governments, and also industries, in which we discuss and we agree the terms and we agree the custody of all of this. So in Brazil, in the specific, we have this with more than 440 farmers. And there is a very nice one for responsible soil as well. So finalizing, what was really the key outcomes of our case? So for procurement perspective, it's critical to change the mindset, moving ahead of the traditional sourcing strategy methodologies, and keeping an eye on how the circular economy principles could be applied to that. Our two examples on the projects, they were really transformational for us. They opened up the way, or they paved the way we have been now from this experience working in Unilever. And third, is really about how you manage your ecosystem. So traditional approach, industry with their first-tier suppliers doesn't apply anymore in a circular economy mindset. So you need really to have a better view, a holistic view of all the elements in your supply ecosystem and how to manage this in a very different way from what we used to do in Unilever. So I think I covered the main topics that are in the chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. Steve and Aldo, would you like to lead the discussion now?
So welcome back, everyone. You are most welcome to turn off your microphone, to put your hand up. We can't see everyone very easily, so if you use the reaction button at the bottom to put your hand up, that would be much easier. I've got a question to ask, which has already appeared in the text. And while I'm asking that question and seeking an answer, I'm going to see if anybody can think up another amazing question. So it's already disappeared off my screen, sorry. Oh my gosh. So what the question that I saw popping up is, how do we define success at the moment? And I think that I find this question interesting because I think the way that we define success is now changing over time. What we thought was success in 2015 might be different to 2020 to 2024. So this was really aimed at Fabio. How does Unilever define success at the moment? And I'm just going to let that out there, Fabio, if you can answer.
Yeah, sure. I think it's how you define the new KPIs related to the strategy. Yeah. So in our, let's say, past, for procurement perspective, it was always about cost. Yeah, that was the main KPI. Now you put other stuff. So you have all this availability that I just mentioned, but we also have projects in which we measure a lot of other KPIs related to life cycle analysis. Or we have done an interesting project with Aldo, the change of natural gas heater for biomass heater. And we have done all the calculations to measure and compare CO2 emissions from one situation from another situation. And the KPI was really to achieve a certain level of reduction. So I think we are really putting into our main KPIs a lot of sustainability goals. Yeah, so CO2 reduction, PCR percentage in the products, on top of water and green energy and so on, which I think are more common across the industry. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to open it up to the room. Does anybody want to bring any questions?
Maybe Paloma would like to add some comment on this question from Steve, please. And Ken, of course.
Sure. Well, it's hard to measure success in an evolving arena. I would say first full disclosure, right? But I fully agree with what Professor Stevens said. What we've defined as success 4 years ago, for example, is it's different today, right? So I think success, if I may speak on behalf of HP, today, I say circular economy is completely integrated into the engineering process, into the process for designing new products, services, and solutions. I think that's one measure of success, because when we started, we were just a small group within the company talking about the circular economy and elevating the discussion.
I think that...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're setting up Ken for his answer.
Okay.
Not that I'm guessing what you're going to say, Ken, but that idea that you know, it's got to be completely, that the use of that word is actually really rather important, rather than circularity being some sort of iconic project, totemic
Oh,
project,
absolutely.
but
Yes.
becoming part of the normal way of doing business, I think is
Precisely.
is at the moment. But Ken, I'm
Precisely.
stealing your time.
Yeah, precisely.
What do you think success might be? You are on mute, Ken.
Yeah, that's the classic thing, isn't it? Right. I'm always torn with this sort of question, really. I think when we don't have to use the phrase circular economy anymore, because it is part of how we approach all of these sort of challenges, when it's a change perspective and it's integrated, and the only question will be about how well you're doing it, rather than whether you should bother, or whether you can get away with it, or whether you can downplay it. I mean, absolutely, I'm happy to be out of a job in those circumstances, but I also worry slightly about this emphasis on measurement, because there's a big difference, as I think we've all heard the phrase before, between doing the right thing and doing things right. And I just hope that we keep the emphasis on doing the right things and worry less about the measurement of it, because it's the direction of travel which matters most. And with complex feedback-rich systems, we're always going to be questioning what we should measure and how adequate that is. So I actually don't spend a lot of time worrying about how you measure success. I am more interested, as was hinted, about how people are treating it as a perspective. If this is the normal way of thinking, and I think I like Steve's point earlier on about we might be on the cusp or the inflection point of a transformation, that makes me and I think lots of other people pretty happy, because transformation will then happen pretty rapidly in the nature of these S curves. So I managed to avoid answering the question, but for me, it's about doing the right thing first, changing perspectives, and then tying in whatever measurement would tell you that you've been successful later. I'll leave it at that. I'm not worried.
I think it's a very good answer. I think it is really easy to get caught in this trap that any question that's related to the idea of success, of better, must be something that must become very quickly measurable. And I'm pretty much in your camp there, Ken, that there's a danger that we spend so much mental effort of incredibly competent people designing a measurement system which won't be valid by the time it's ready, because the world has moved on.
Yeah.
Your comment about mindsets, and I think that you're not the only one to have used this phrase already today, that the mindset is actually one of the ways in which we'll know we're succeeding on this very difficult to measure mindset.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
I've gabbled on in the hope that somebody's going to come up with some amazing question in the chat that I haven't opened yet. But everybody is so polite, they're answering the questions in the chat, which is very good for a written record and terrible for a debate. Come on, people. Anybody want to ask a difficult?
Yeah, I have a slightly interesting question. Future Earth has the term transdisciplinarity as one of its visionary actions. And transdisciplinarity essentially means working across disciplines, but also involved with and this has to be the last question, unfortunately, because we are over. Involvement of industry working with academia to co-create solutions. Has that occurred? among the companies. Do you find industry and academic participation a critical way of advancing circular economy practice and knowledge? And Paloma and Fabio, maybe both of you can be present a little bit of that, and maybe Ken, some of your experiences. But we have to keep this short, unfortunately, because we are over. Paloma, please.
I try to be very brief. The answer is yes, for sure. Absolutely. We need to partner with the academia. For example, in areas like materials innovation, it is critical in advancement. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, our experience, not only in technologies for manufacturing, for instance, just the one I explained, the biomass heater, but also for products, for innovation, for ingredients, for new raw materials, and so on. So absolutely, the answer is yes.
And Ken.
Mute again, Ken.
Yeah, you're muted again.
Yeah, everybody's agreeing with each other. This is also a bit a bit tricky in a way. Sure, you're going to imagine collaboration, and it's going to accelerate as industry gets more and more involved. What I'm wondering about a little bit is the things that we were hinting at in our chapter, which is, will we be brave enough to take a more holistic sense of what a circular economy is, rather than we've got some great business models and some new materials.
Thank you, Ken.
Can I please take 30 seconds to respond to this? Because I think this is incredibly important. And as a very ancient academic myself, past the age of retirement, I've taken to doing less research and doing more impact. And I think one of the things I'm fascinated by right now is helping companies rethink their own mindset. I'm stealing your phrase again, Ken. I think that we as academics can help people create thinking spaces and help them become more brave. We don't have to be the brave people, but we can help people with operational responsibility become more brave. And I would encourage us all to go and do this. It's quite fun. It's massively rewarding. And we learn from watching people trying to change systems. So I'm definitely stopping there.
Okay. All right, Aldo, you'll do the closing, and I'll put up the thank you screen.
All right. Thank you all. It was a pleasure to have you all here, and some highlights here that we addressed related to the change from the process and perspectives to the ecosystem, to the efficiency, to the effectiveness, and not only the cost reduction and the waste and focus on circular economy, but mainly on the value generation and how is the innovation and new values can work on that. So the system perspective and the long-term value, and with collaboration and the value for all, it want to be the way that we can get this more regenerative and positive impact system. Sustainability is not a requirement for circular economy, but it can be a consequence if a process of this disruptive systemic innovation of business and technology are made based on this long-term value generation for all. So we all here hope this book can be a seed for you to be part of this journey and can be more brave for this transition. So, but the webinar doesn't end here now, because it continues. We have in November 7th the second webinar about this book, that we are going to talk more about these fundamentals and the practical way for this systems transition and for value generation for all. So thank you all partners, and thank you for your attention. Have a great day, great night, well, wherever you are. Thank you. Let's do it in a global also perspective, in a global cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day, night, everything. Bye.
Thank you.